Eric Daniels never expected his quiet Thursday night to end in horror, and Melissa Carter never imagined the secret she carried would turn into a nightmare, until a small cooler on his doorstep revealed a shocking truth no one could have predicted. Eric Daniels lived alone in a small rented house on the outskirts of Maple Ridge, a quiet town where the loudest noise at night was the hum of streetlights. His life was ordinary, marked by predictable routines. Work, dinner, and evenings spent scrolling through his phone. That Thursday evening started no differently, until he noticed something strange on his porch. A small blue cooler sat by his door, beads of condensation glistening under the porch light. There was no note, no message, nothing to indicate who had left it. At first he assumed it was a delivery mistake, maybe a neighbor's lost package. But when he saw his name faintly scrawled across the lid in black marker, unease crept over him. He crouched to inspect it, noticing how cold the sides felt against his hands. Something inside shifted slightly, a dull, soft sound that made his stomach twist. He brought the cooler inside, setting it on the kitchen counter. For a few minutes, he just stood there, staring at it, debating whether to open it or throw it away. Curiosity and dread tangled in his mind. Finally, he unclipped the lid. The moment it popped open, a sharp chill filled the air, followed by a faint, sterile scent. At first, he thought it was some kind of raw meat or medical waste, something unpleasant but not alarming. But then his eyes focused on the small plastic bundle resting at the bottom, wrapped tightly in hospital gauze. His breath caught as realization struck. Inside that bundle was the unmistakable form of a tiny human body. Panic surged through him. He stumbled back, his mind blank except for one thought. Someone was playing a horrifying trick. He grabbed his phone with trembling hands, dialing 911. When the operator answered, his words came out in broken gasps. Within minutes, the sound of sirens filled the street. Red and blue lights flashed against the windows, painting the walls in sickening color. Officers rushed inside, their faces changing from alert professionalism to grim disbelief as they looked into the cooler. One of them quickly closed the lid and stepped away, shaking his head. Another gently led Eric outside, asking questions he could barely answer. Neighbors began gathering, whispering in confusion as the scene unfolded. The air was heavy with fear and disbelief. No one could imagine something like this happening in their quiet town. The police sealed off the property with yellow tape, photographers documented the evidence, and investigators combed through the yard for clues. Eric sat on the curb, numb and silent, replaying the moment over and over in his mind. The image of the cooler, the smell of cold air mixed with antiseptic, the sight of that small, lifeless form. None of it made sense. When an officer finally asked if he recognized the handwriting on the cooler, Eric's heart sank. He knew the answer before he could bring himself to say it. The letters were shaky but familiar. They belonged to Melissa Carter, his ex-girlfriend. The realization struck him like ice, spreading through his veins. Whatever this was, it wasn't a prank. It was something darker, something beyond comprehension. And it had just begun. Melissa Carter's name spread through Maple Ridge like wildfire within hours of the police identifying her connection to the cooler. To most people, she was the last person anyone would suspect of something so disturbing. She worked as a nurse at the Maple Ridge Community Clinic, known for her calm demeanor and careful precision. Her neighbors described her as quiet, polite, and often alone. But when detectives arrived at her small apartment on Cedar Lane, they found a world that contradicted that calm image. The curtains were drawn tight even in daylight, and the air carried a faint scent of antiseptic mixed with something metallic. On the kitchen counter lay unopened letters, empty pill bottles, and a half-eaten sandwich left to harden. The walls seemed to hold silence too heavy to breathe in. The investigator's eyes quickly caught sight of medical supplies scattered across the bathroom counter, gauze, latex gloves, a blood pressure monitor, and a plastic basin stained faintly pink. In the trash bin was a torn hospital bracelet with her name printed on it. That discovery confirmed their worst fear. Melissa had given birth recently, but there was no sign of a living child. Detectives carefully photographed the scene while others collected evidence. On the nightstand by her bed sat a small framed photo of her and Eric from happier days. The glass cracked down the middle. Next to it lay a folded ultrasound image dated 6 months earlier. The implication was clear. She had carried the pregnancy in secret, isolated from the world around her. The more the police uncovered, the more haunting her actions appeared. They found receipts from a pharmacy for prenatal vitamins, notes scribbled in a journal about feeling unseen and forgotten, and a stained towel hidden under her bed. What struck investigators most was a chilling entry in her handwriting that read, "He'll know the truth when it's too late." It wasn't clear what truth she meant, but it gave the case an edge of premeditation that made everyone uneasy. Neighbors told police they hadn't seen her leave the apartment for days before the incident. They'd heard water running for hours late at night, followed by what one described as a faint, muffled sobbing. The medical examiner's preliminary report confirmed that Melissa had likely given birth alone, without assistance or medical care. Whether the baby had been stillborn or died shortly after birth was uncertain, but one fact was clear. She had made no attempt to seek help. Instead, she had taken steps to conceal what had happened, wrapping the remains and placing them in a cooler before driving it to Eric's home. The act seemed both desperate and deliberate, a blend of grief and vengeance. By the time police located Melissa, she was sitting motionless in her car outside a closed pharmacy, staring blankly ahead. There was no struggle when they approached her. She didn't speak or resist as they took her into custody. Her expression didn't shift when they told her why she was being arrested. Behind her calm face was something unreachable, something hollow. Whatever had driven her to that moment lay buried deep within her, and it was clear that understanding it would take investigators down a dark and painful path. Detectives dug deeper into Melissa Carter's past, searching for motives that could explain the chilling actions she had taken. As they interviewed friends and co-workers, a pattern began to emerge. Melissa had been in a relationship with Eric Daniels for nearly 2 years, and during that time, she had confided in very few people about her life. Friends described her as devoted but intensely private, someone who took criticism personally and struggled with feelings of rejection. When the couple broke up, her demeanor changed dramatically. She stopped socializing, missed work occasionally, and began obsessively tracking Eric's movements online. Her friends noticed cryptic posts on her social media, messages that hinted at bitterness, heartbreak, and lingering anger, but no one realized the depth of what she was planning. Police examined Melissa's phone and computer, discovering hundreds of messages, searches, and notes she had written to herself. Many referenced her pregnancy, but some hinted at her fixation on Eric's new life. She had searched his name alongside terms like regret and what he left behind, repeatedly checking his social media accounts and photos with his new girlfriend. Investigators concluded that Melissa's actions were not impulsive. She had been meticulously planning a way to make Eric confront something horrifying. Every detail, from the cooler to the timing of delivery, appeared calculated. It was as if she wanted him to experience a pain she felt, a twisted sense of revenge for the perceived betrayals she had endured. DNA tests added another shocking layer to the investigation. For weeks, police had assumed Eric was the father, and the thought of him receiving a fetus only intensified the horror. When the lab results returned, they confirmed something unexpected. The child was not Eric's. The father was a man unknown to the detectives, a detail that complicated the motive and raised questions about Melissa's intentions. Why would she go to such lengths to involve Eric in something that wasn't his responsibility? Experts suggested that her actions reflected a psychological need to make someone pay, someone she believed had abandoned or humiliated her. Eric had represented a past life she could not let go of, and delivering the fetus to him may have been her way of forcing him to confront consequences he didn't and deserve. As investigators reviewed her journals, they uncovered a chilling blend of grief, anger, and obsession. One entry described a scenario where she imagined Eric holding a bundle in his hands, shocked and confused, and feeling powerless. Another noted the secrecy and meticulous care she took in preparing the cooler, the hours spent cleaning and sanitizing, and the steps she believed would ensure no one traced it back to her until it was too late. Each entry revealed the depths of her planning and the cold, calculated precision with which she acted. Police also discovered that Melissa had isolated herself during the pregnancy, avoiding contact with neighbors and friends while preparing for the delivery. Her behavior was increasingly erratic, marked by long periods of silence, pacing, and obsessive note-taking. Detectives concluded that the combination of heartbreak, anger, and psychological deterioration created the perfect storm that led to the horrifying events with the cooler. Melissa's world, once ordinary and controlled, had twisted into something dangerous and unpredictable, leaving everyone around her shaken and desperate to understand how someone could cross such a terrifying line. Investigators soon uncovered a layer of Melissa Carter's life that made the case even more disturbing. Beyond her history with Eric Daniels, there was evidence of a secret relationship with a married man who worked at the same clinic where she was employed. His identity had remained hidden for months, but phone records and emails revealed hundreds of messages between them, many of which were flirtatious or obsessive in tone. The affair had ended abruptly, leaving Melissa feeling rejected and humiliated. Friends described her as deeply affected by the breakup, noting that she seemed consumed by thoughts of both men, replaying moments in her mind and imagining scenarios in which they suffered consequences for abandoning her. Her isolation, once seen as introversion, now appeared as part of a growing obsession, a dangerous tunnel of thought that fueled her actions. When police examined her apartment further, they found stacks of printed emails, notes, and photographs connected to the married man, along with scribbled messages that indicated a sense of anger and betrayal. Phrases like, "He left me alone," and "He can escape what I carry," were repeated across several pages. Investigators theorized that Melissa A.'s actions with the cooler were not merely a reaction to grief or anger, but a calculated attempt to involve Eric in a shocking and humiliating situation. By delivering the fetus to him, she ensured he would become part of the chaos she had created, forced to confront something horrifying that he had no part in creating. The act appeared designed to punish him emotionally, to make him experience fear, guilt, and confusion simultaneously. The forensic analysis of the fetus and cooler revealed evidence of careful handling. There were no signs of haste. The fetus had been wrapped and placed in a way that showed she had thought through every step. Investigators concluded that Melissa had spent days, possibly weeks, preparing for the moment she would confront Eric indirectly. The timeline aligned with the evidence from her journal, phone records, and apartment, painting a picture of premeditation that added gravity to the charges she would eventually face. Every element, from the selection of the cooler to the timing of delivery and the decision to leave it at Eric's door, pointed to meticulous planning rather than a moment of panic or irrationality. Psychologists later examined Melissa's behavior, suggesting that her mindset was shaped by a combination of heartbreak, obsession, and unresolved psychological trauma. Her fixation on both men in her life had evolved into a dangerous compulsion, a need to exert control over circumstances that had once left her feeling powerless. Experts noted that the act of giving the fetus to Eric was symbolic, a twisted representation of her feelings of abandonment and betrayal. The crime, they said, reflected a mind consumed by vengeance and a desire to externalize her pain in the most shocking way possible. When police brought Melissa in for questioning, she remained eerily calm. She did not cry, did not plead, and did not appear confused. Her blank expression and composed demeanor suggested she had anticipated every step of the investigation and the consequences of her actions. Every question seemed to confirm her intentions rather than deter them. The investigators left that session with a sense of unease, recognizing that the horror of the cooler incident was not a spontaneous act of desperation, but the result of deliberate, careful planning driven by psychological turmoil and a desire for revenge that would leave an entire town stunned and shaken for years to come. Melissa Carter S.'s arrest and the subsequent investigation captured the attention of the entire town of Maple Ridge and soon spread across the nation. News crews flocked to the streets outside her apartment and Eric Daniels' home, capturing every detail of the tragedy that had unfolded in a seemingly quiet town. When formal charges were announced, they included abuse of a corpse, obstruction of justice, and tampering with evidence. The public was horrified by the calculated nature of her actions, and experts on crime shows and in the media dissected her behavior, trying to understand the twisted combination of grief, anger, and obsession that had led to the shocking delivery of the cooler. The courtroom became a place of tension and unease. Melissa sat silently through hearings, her face a blank mask as lawyers detailed the sequence of events. Prosecutors presented photographs of her apartment, the cooler, and the evidence collected during the investigation, carefully illustrating the premeditated nature of her crime. They highlighted her journals, the messages to Eric, and the meticulous handling of the fetus, demonstrating a level of planning that suggested this was not a momentary lapse in judgment. Psychologists called in as expert witnesses described Melissa's state of mind, explaining that her actions were driven by unresolved emotional trauma and an obsessive need for control and retribution. Eric Daniels, still reeling from the trauma, struggled to continue his daily life. He moved out of Maple Ridge shortly after the incident, unable to erase the memory of the cooler or the horror of opening it on that night. His friends and family supported him, but the emotional scars lingered. The thought that someone he had once trusted could plan such a cruel act haunted him. Even after Melissa's arrest, he experienced waves of fear and anger, replaying the event in his mind and questioning whether he had missed signs of her psychological deterioration. Melissa's trial revealed further details about her secret life, including the affair with the married doctor and the obsessive surveillance she had conducted of both men. The courtroom learned that she had carefully concealed her pregnancy, avoided medical assistance, and isolated herself from everyone around her. The evidence painted a portrait of a woman whose heartbreak and obsession had escalated into a methodical and horrifying crime. The prosecution argued that every step, from conceiving the plan to preparing the cooler and delivering it to Eric, was deliberate, aimed at inflicting psychological pain on someone she blamed for her suffering. In the end, Melissa was convicted and sentenced to a lengthy prison term. The judgment provided some closure to the town, but the case left a lasting mark on the community. The cooler, once a mundane household item, had become a chilling symbol of betrayal, obsession, and calculated vengeance. Experts and criminologists cited the case as an example of how emotional turmoil, combined with isolation and obsession, could lead to actions that defy logic and morality. Years later, Maple Ridge still remembered the night Eric opened the cooler, the horror of what it contained, and the dark story of a woman whose grief and anger turned into a crime that shocked everyone who heard it. The questions lingered. Was Melissa driven purely by heartbreak, or had she carefully orchestrated every moment to ensure the ultimate shock and punishment for those she felt had wronged her? The mystery of her mind remained as haunting as the act itself.